Montana Territory, November 3rd, 1892. The sun was sinking behind the wide hills, painting the land in gold and sorrow. Clara Mae Dawson gripped the broken fence, her hands rough, her eyes tired. "Ma, we ain't got much wood left," Eli said softly, his voice trembling in the cold. Clara turned, forcing a smile. "We'll manage, sweetheart. We always do." Beside them, little Lucy hugged her rag doll, her breath turning white in the winter air. The wind carried the smell of dust, distance, and silent prayers. Somewhere in that silence, Clara's heart whispered for a miracle. Something, anything to save her small family from the weight of hunger and loss. But fate was already on its way, riding slow through the dying light. A stranger bleeding on the trail, closer than they could ever imagine. The wind howled louder that night, pushing against the old wooden walls of Clara's farmhouse. The lantern light flickered, throwing long shadows across the worn floorboards. Eli sat by the window, his small hands pressed to the glass. "Ma," he whispered, "there's something out there, moving." Clara looked up from the fire she was trying to keep alive. "It's probably the wind, Eli. Go sit with your sister." But the boy didn't move. His voice dropped to a shaky whisper. "No, Ma, it's a man." Clara's heart skipped. She hurried to the window, and there, under the pale moonlight, lay a figure slumped beside the fence. His coat was torn, his body still. Without a second thought, she grabbed the lantern and stepped into the cold. "Stay inside," she called to the children. Snow crunched under her boots as she knelt beside him. His shirt was soaked with blood, breath shallow, face pale beneath a rough beard. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice trembling. His eyes flickered open, gray, tired, yet strangely kind. "Water, please," he rasped. Clara dragged him up with all the strength she had, half carrying him toward the house. Inside, Eli rushed to help, while Lucy gasped and clung to her doll. "Get some clean cloth," Clara ordered, "and heat more water." For hours, she cleaned his wounds by the dim glow of the fire, her hands steady despite the fear. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering names she didn't know. Cole. They took everything. When dawn came, his breathing had steadied. Clara sat beside him, exhausted, watching the sunlight touch his face. He looked older than she first thought, maybe 35. There was something noble about him, even in weakness. The kind of man used to giving orders, not begging for help. Eli stood nearby. "Who is he, Ma?" Clara shook her head softly. "I don't know, darling. But whoever he is, he's got a hard story behind those eyes." Days passed. The stranger, Jackson Cole, slowly recovered. He spoke little, but his quiet gratitude filled the small house. He helped mend the fence with Eli, taught Lucy how to whistle through a straw, and even repaired Clara's broken lantern without being asked. Still, Clara often caught him staring out toward the horizon, like he was waiting for something, or someone. One evening, as the firelight danced across his face, Jackson spoke. "You shouldn't have helped me, ma'am. Folks out here don't risk much for strangers." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what's wrong with this land. People forgot how to care." For a moment, the air between them turned quiet, not empty, but heavy with something unspoken. Outside, the sky burned red over the Montana plains. Inside, 3 hearts and 1 wounded soul found warmth that winter. Unaware that the past he ran from was already riding closer, carrying danger, truth, and fate in its saddlebag. Days blended into quiet weeks. The snow began to melt, leaving the earth muddy and alive again. Jackson worked alongside Clara and the kids, his strength slowly returning, though his eyes still carried something heavy, a storm that hadn't passed. Eli adored him. "Mr. Jackson," the boy said one morning, "you ever owned a horse like Thunder?" He pointed proudly at their old mare. Jackson smiled faintly. "I've owned a few. None as loyal as her, though." Lucy giggled from the porch. "You talk like a cowboy from the stories, mister." Clara watched them from the doorway, her heart strangely at peace. For the first time since her husband died, laughter lived in that house again. But peace never stays long in the West. That night, Jackson awoke to the sound of hooves, distant but fast. He stepped out quietly, hand resting on the old rifle Clara's late husband had left behind. The moon glowed silver on the empty plains. Then he saw them. 3 riders, shadows against the horizon, heading straight for the farm. He froze. His past had found him. Inside, Clara stirred. "Jackson, what is it?" He turned, voice low. "You and the kids, stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. Who are they?" He hesitated, jaw tightening. "Men I used to know. They think I took what belonged to them." Her breath caught. "Did you?" "No," he said quietly, eyes burning. "But that won't stop them from trying to finish what they started." The riders arrived before dawn. Dust and gunmetal filled the air. One shouted, "We know you're in there, Cole. You can't hide behind a woman and her brats forever." Eli gasped, clutching his sister. Clara stepped in front of them, voice steady but fierce. "My house ain't your battleground." "Leave us be." A cruel laugh came from outside. He's worth a fortune dead, lady. Step aside if you value your skin. Jackson loaded the rifle, every click echoing like thunder in the silence. You hurt them, and I'll end this the hard way. The standoff felt endless. Then the crack of a gun. Glass shattered. Lucy screamed. Clara pulled her down, trembling. Jackson fired back, his aim sharp despite the pain that ripped through his shoulder. Eli crawled to him, handing bullets with shaking hands. You can't let them in, Mr. Jackson. Not while I'm breathing, he gritted. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the outlaws fled into the darkness, leaving silence and blood behind. When it was over, Clara knelt beside him, tears streaking her face. You saved us, she whispered. He looked at her weakly, a faint smile breaking through. You saved me first, ma'am. Just took me longer to return the favor. As the dawn rose again, the wind carried the smell of gunpowder and promise. Clara held his hand, knowing everything had changed. The man she once called a stranger had just risked his life for her family, but the secrets he carried still weren't done with them yet. The house smelled of smoke and fear. Morning light crept through the shattered window, glinting off empty shells on the floor. Clara tied a cloth around Jackson's wounded shoulder, her hands trembling but steady enough to stop the bleeding. You're losing too much blood, she murmured. Jackson gave a weak grin. Lost worse before. Ain't planning on quitting yet. Eli sat beside him, wiping sweat from his brow. You shot better than Pa ever did, the boy said, trying to sound brave. Jackson's smile faded. Your Pa must have been a good man. The best, Clara whispered. And I buried him right under that old oak. Silence filled the room, heavy and aching. The crackling fire was the only sound between them until Clara spoke again. Tell me, Jackson, who were those men? He sighed deeply, eyes staring into the flames. I reckon you deserve the truth. He looked older suddenly, like the weight of years sat on his shoulders. I was born not too far from here, worked my way up, bought land, built the biggest cattle ranch this side of Montana. Folks called me Jackson Cole, the man with the golden herd. I had everything, money, men, power, and I thought that made me untouchable. Clara listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. But greed don't ride alone, he continued. My own partners wanted more. They cheated ranchers, stole water rights, crushed small farmers. I let it happen, Clara. I turned my back on people who needed help. When I finally spoke up, they turned their guns on me, left me bleeding in the dust. Lucy peeked from behind Clara's skirt, eyes wide. Then why did they come back? Because I took something before I left, Jackson said softly. Not money, proof. A ledger with every dirty deal they made. It's buried out there in the hills. They'll never stop till they find it. Clara frowned. And now they think it's here? He nodded slowly. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. Clara's voice broke. You didn't bring trouble, Jackson. Trouble found you, but you saved my children. That's what matters. For the first time, his eyes softened completely. You don't know what that means to me, ma'am. I ain't had a family around me in years. Thought I didn't deserve one. Eli leaned forward. Well, maybe you do now. Jackson looked at the boy, small, brave, pure-hearted, and something inside him healed a little. That night, as the stars scattered across the sky, Clara stood on the porch, staring out over the fields. Jackson joined her quietly. The land's peaceful, he said. Almost makes a man believe he's got a second chance. She turned to him, her voice gentle. Maybe that's what you were given, another shot to make things right. He nodded slowly, watching the horizon. Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. Neither noticed the shadow in the distance, a lone rider watching from afar, the faint glint of metal catching the moonlight. Trouble wasn't gone. It was just waiting for dawn. Dawn broke cold and gray. The air felt uneasy, too still, too quiet for comfort. Jackson stood on the porch, rifle resting on his shoulder, eyes fixed on the far ridge where the lone rider had vanished hours ago. Inside, Clara packed a few things. Bread, bandages, water, just in case. Her hands moved fast, but her heart was pounding. She could feel it, too. The storm wasn't over. Eli tugged at her sleeve. Ma, are they coming back? She knelt beside him, brushing hair from his face. Maybe, but we'll face whatever comes. Together. Before she could rise, the sound of hooves thundered again. Closer this time. Too many to count. Dust lifted in the distance. Jackson's jaw tightened. They found us. He turned sharply. Clara, take the kids out back. There's a root cellar under the barn. Go now. No, she said firmly, fire in her eyes. I won't hide while you fight alone. He stared at her, something fierce and tender burning behind his eyes. Then promise me you'll keep those kids safe, no matter what happens to me. Her voice broke. Don't you dare talk like that. The first bullets shattered the silence. Glass splintered. The barn door groaned under the echo of gunfire. Jackson ducked, loading fast. Eli cried out, clinging to Lucy as Clara pushed them toward cover. Jackson fired through the window, hitting one outlaw clean off his horse. Stay low. he shouted. Don't let him circle behind. The world became chaos, smoke, shouting, the sharp crack of rifles. The small farmhouse shook under the storm of lead. Clara grabbed the shotgun her husband once used for hunting and fired back from the doorway. Jackson looked over his shoulder. Pride flickered in his eyes. You shoot straighter than most men I know, ma'am. Guess I learned from the best, she replied, breathless. Another shot tore through the roof, grazing Jackson's arm. He stumbled, then steadied himself, blood dripping down his sleeve. Eli darted out before Clara could stop him, shouting, Leave him alone. He threw a rock at one of the riders, striking the man's horse. The outlaw lost control, crashing into the fence. Jackson grabbed Eli, pulling him back to safety. You got guts, kid, he said, voice strained. But don't you ever do that again. When the smoke cleared, only 2 riders remained. The leader, a tall man in a black coat, dismounted, calling out, You can't win, Cole. Hand over that ledger and maybe I'll let the woman live. Jackson raised his rifle, eyes cold as steel. You'll have to take it from my grave. A single shot echoed. Dust swirled. The man in black fell hard into the dirt. Silence returned, heavy and unreal. The surviving rider fled, leaving only wind and smoke behind. Clara ran to Jackson, clutching him as he collapsed to his knees. Blood darkened his shirt again. You're hurt, he smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. Ain't the first time, but it might be the last. No, she cried, holding him tighter. Jackson's hand brushed her cheek, gentle as a prayer. You and the kids, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to live. And then, with dawn breaking over the plains, he fell silent in her arms, the rising sun washing the land in gold and sorrow. Weeks passed since that morning the sun rose over blood and silence. The land had healed faster than Clara's heart. The bullet wounds, the broken glass, all repaired. But the empty chair by the fire stayed untouched. Eli and Lucy played outside again, laughter echoing across the fields, though both still looked toward the hills now and then, as if expecting their cowboy to ride back home. One evening, Clara found an envelope tucked beneath Jackson's old saddle. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Clara, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. The ranch, the land, and the herd, they're yours now. You gave me life when I'd given up. Make it a home again for them and for you. Her tears fell on his name. She looked out toward the golden horizon and whispered, You didn't just change our lives, Jackson. You saved them. The wind brushed past her, soft and warm, like a goodbye carried on sunlight. And somewhere beyond those hills it felt as if a lone rider smiled, finally at peace.